We have Dr. Bob Brier, recognized as one of the most distinguished Egyptologists, and Senior Research Fellow at the C.W. Post campus of Long Island University. He conducts pioneering research in mummification practices, and he's investigated some of the world's most famous mummies, including King Tutankhamun, Vladimir Lenin, Ramses the Great, Eva Peron of Evita fame, Marquise Tai, the Chinese noblewoman, and the Medici family of Renaissance Italy. You know, with midterms coming up next week, I can't help thinking this is a great discussion question. What do these mummies have in common? In 1994, Dr. Brier became the first person in 2,000 years to mummify a human cadaver using the exact techniques of the ancient Egyptians. This research was the subject of a National Geographic TV special titled Mr. Mummy. He was the host of several award-winning television specials for TLC, including Pyramids, Mummies and Tombs and Mummy Detective. More recently, National Geographic TV presented his research in a documentary called Secrets of the Great Pyramid, discussing a new theory of how the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. Dr. Brier's research has been featured in such media venues as CNN, 60 Minutes, and the New York Times. His most recent book is Cleopatra's Needles, the Lost Obelisks of Egypt. That's 2016. But there's a long trail of publications before that one, including Egyptomania, our 3,000-year obsession with the land of the pharaohs in 2013, The Secret of the Great Pyramid, How One Man's Obsession Led to the Solution of Ancient Egypt's Greatest Mystery, 2009, The Murder of Tutankhamun, 2005, Encyclopedia of Mummies, 1998, Egyptian Mummies Unraveling the Secrets of an Ancient Art, 1996, and that is just a sampling. That is not even all of it. So tonight, though, it's all about Giza, one of my favorite places on Earth, and it's all about boats. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Mummy, Dr. Bob Brier.
Thanks, Peter. I should correct him, though. It may not be right that I'm Mr. Mummy. When National Geographic did this documentary about the mummification project, they titled it Mr. Mummy. I had nothing to do with the title. And we were talking about it, and I think it refers to the mummy rather than me. I think they would have said Dr. Mummy if it was me, I think. But anyway, what I'd like to talk to you today about is a project I'm working on now, just beginning. And it involves one of the great discoveries of the 20th century, one of the great archaeological discoveries, the Cheops Boat. But let me give you a little bit of background. Now, this will work. It was found on the Giza Plateau, which is a World Heritage Site and houses the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing, the Great Pyramid of Giza, right? But it's a lot more than the pyramid. I gotta get used to this thing. There are plenty of other pyramids here, and let me explain why my title slide said Cheops Boat, but the poster said Khufu Boat, right? The pyramids, the big ones, let me do it here. I think it's gonna work. Let's see, wait. Yeah. Now, this is the Great Pyramid of Giza here, right? Now, it's called both Cheops Pyramid and Khufu's Pyramid. His mama called him Khufu, right? That was his ancient Egyptian name. But when the Greeks came in, the name was corrupted, right, by the Greeks to Cheops. And when the boat was discovered, it was called the Cheops Boat, though it was built by the pharaoh Khufu, right? And for 50 years, it's been called the Cheops Boat. So I sort of have a tendency to keep calling it the Cheops Boat, though it's built by the pharaoh Khufu, right? So anyway, there are plenty of pyramids on the Giza Plateau also, but there's more. Now, it's a cemetery, the Giza Plateau, and one of the important features is here. This is a cemetery, right? These are mastabas. It's Arabic for bench. Each one is an individual tomb where the nobles and royals were buried. There's an eastern and western cemetery, right? And if you go closer in, this is what it looks like from the ground. It's a city of the dead, literally streets where you can walk, and you can go in and visit these places. This is an example of one of the mastabas, Meritank, right? And if you really want to see details of these and can't go to Egypt, go to Giza, Harvard Giza project. I think that'll do it. I did it that way. And they have everything, archived. You can actually take almost a walking tour through the mastabas. You can see all the details. It's really a wonderful thing to do. So the pyramid is not the only thing there. There's an awful lot more. Now, it's all about death, the whole Giza Plateau. It's all about death. And there are mummies in the mastabas. We're looking, by the way, at the mummy of Ramses the Great. Right? This is probably the only face from the Bible you will ever see. Right? He's probably the pharaoh of the Exodus. Now, the reason we have the pyramids and the mastabas, the tombs, is their belief in life after death. The Egyptians were resurrectionists. They believed that the body was literally going to get up and go again in the next world. So you had to preserve it. And that's why we have mummies. Right? Now, where was the body going to go when it got up and resurrected? The answer was in the West. The West was always associated with death. The sun died in the West and was reborn in the East, right? So even when the Egyptians died, they had the phrase, he went west. And the dead people were referred to as Westerners. It's kind of like our euphemism when we say he passed on. It's quite similar, right? Or the dearly departed. He's going on a trip. It's similar. So everything on the Giza Plateau pretty much relates to death in some way. Now, how are you going to get to the West? Right? How are you going to get to the West? Well, the Egyptians really only had one way of traveling long distances, by boat. By boat. They weren't a desert people. They didn't have camels. That's a later introduction. So if you wanted to go anywhere by a distance, you had to take a boat. So the Egyptians believed that the pharaoh, when he died, like Ramses, when he went west, would go by boat. Right? Actually, he'd go by two boats. He had one boat for the night sky and one boat for the day sky. So it's also all about boats, and you'll see. But that's not what we're going to talk about yet. Okay. Now, what I'm interested in is here. Let me see if I can show you. Yeah. This pit here. I think you can all see it, right? And there's another one here. These are boat pits. On the Giza Plateau, boats were buried with the pharaohs. Now, these pits are empty, as you can see, and they were empty throughout modern times. The wood was robbed. We think there were boats in them. We think. Never found a boat on the Giza Plateau up until 1954. We think there were boats in them. Not sure exactly what the use was, but they were robbed because wood was very valuable in ancient Egypt. It was worth a fortune. So no boats found yet until 1954. Right? Let me show you what a boat looks like, a boat pit. That's up close. That's the boat pit. Right? Now, if you look over here, straight lines, these are walls. The pyramids had walls around them, enclosure walls. The idea was to keep the riffraff out. This was a pharaoh's burial. You weren't supposed to be walking in and out. So they were enclosure walls. And in 1954, a young architect working for the Egyptian Antiquity Service was given the job of removing one of the enclosure walls around the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Right? And he started his work, and he was an architect, so he was taking measurements, careful measurements, and he discovered that 3 of the walls were the same distance from the pyramid, but the 4th wall was a little bit closer. And he wondered why, and when he removed the wall, he discovered the Cheops Boat. Under the wall, by the wall, was a pit. And this is what it looked like somewhat. These are limestone blocks covering the top of the pit, and inside was the boat, looking like this. Right? It's in pieces intentionally, hasn't fallen apart. It was placed that way, 13 layers, right? And it's basically like a big model boat kit with no instruction. Right? And it's kind of daunting. I mean, you look at it and you say, how are you going to put this baby together? Now, fortunately, the pit was virtually airtight. So the boat, the wood, still had about 99% of its moisture. So it was strong. It wasn't fragile. It could be moved, and there was a possibility of putting it together. Now, the man who put it together is a bit of a hero and a legend in the field, Haj Ahmed. He was a conservator, a wood conservator, really good, very patient man. And it took 2 years to take the pieces out of the pit, and it took him another 10 to put the boat back together. Right? He interned at boatyards in Alexandria, learning how they made ships. He carved models, and then he started putting it together. Let me give you an idea of what it looked like as he's putting it together. So he's built a shed, and he's got the boat, and they're putting it together. Now, the construction of the boat was unusual. Egyptian boats are not made the way we make boats. This is called a sewn boat. I think you can see all of the holes. Let me see if I can find it. It's going to come. Come on. Oop, it'll get there. There. You see all the holes? This boat is not nailed or pegged. It's tied together. All the pieces are tied together. And I'll explain why in a little while. So that's an unusual construction technique. The other unusual construction technique is that they build the hull first and then put the ribs in afterwards. Right? So it's unusual. So Hajj Ahmed had to learn new techniques, see how this thing's working, and he puts it together. It takes him 10 years to put it together. The first time he finished is 1968, right? It's discovered in 54, puts it together in 68, and figures out he did it wrong. He had to take it apart. It's kind of like when you were a kid doing a model and you had pieces left over. You sort of knew it wasn't right. So he took it apart. But he, as I said, he carved models, to give you an idea. I think you'll see there's also something else unusual about the boat, the oars. I mean, it's a strange configuration. Hajj Ahmed sort of made that up. There were no places for rowers to sit on the boat and row. There were no oar locks where the oars would attach to the boat. So he just sort of displayed it that way. But very unusual, how are the oars used even? And the third thing that's very unusual about the boat, it had no mast and it had no sails. Right? What was it used for? This gives you an idea of how the thing was constructed. You can see there's ties here throughout, just a little model. The rope was still in the boat. They found plenty of rope. It's still pliant. And you get an idea of how things are tied together. And this is the hull. And now look over here. That's one of the ties. You don't see the ties in general on the boat because they're going through the wood. It's 5-inch thick planking. So the ties go through and out to another one, thin, kind of like lacing a sneaker, but you don't see it on the outside. Right? And this is pulled away a little bit. Well, I'm going to do this. It's pulled away a little bit so you see it. Also, notice the way the wood fits together. Right? Not even planks. And the idea is twofold. One is it gives you a little more structural strength. It's going to shift. It won't shift. And the other thing is you're using every bit of wood. It's very, very valuable. This plank, by the way, let me show it to you. This one, right here. Whoops, don't let me do that. There, this one. It's the longest plank in the boat. It's 74 feet long. This thing is a 144-foot boat. Right? It is one of the largest and certainly the best preserved boat from the ancient world. Right? But the question is, how was it used? It's not clear. Not clear. Now, this is what it looks like in the boat museum today. Right? It's a beautiful thing. Big, really impressive. Anyway, as soon as the boat was found, people started to speculate on how it was used. The first one out of the gate was a really good Egyptologist named Cherny, Yaroslav Cherny, and he hadn't even seen the boat. It was still in the pit, and he came up with the theory that it was for mythological use. It was a symbolic boat going through the sky in some way. I'll show it to you. This is a tomb painting, right? And this is one of these celestial boats. The pharaoh's going to go to the next world, and the gods are going to accompany him, and this is one of the boats that's going to go with him, right? And Cherny figured this is one of those boats. Now, he had a strange reasoning. He's a really good Egyptologist, really good, but his reasoning is strange. There were 5 boat pits around the Great Pyramid, and Cherny reasoned that since you only needed 2 for the boat to go through the night sky and the day sky, the Cheops boat couldn't be one of those. Right? It couldn't be one of those. It had to be something else. So he figured it was mythological. But we'll see about that. But there's a better theory. Better theory. The temple at Abydos is one of the most sacred spots in all of Egypt. It's dedicated primarily to the god Osiris, the god of the dead. Right? Now, this is Osiris, god of the dead. He's green because that's the color of resurrection. Right? So everybody's going to resurrect in the next world. He is also bandaged like a mummy, right? Because he's god of the dead. He's holding the symbols of power, and the hieroglyphs on the left, which read from left to right, says Osiris, ruler of eternity, right? And then there's another name for him, Wennefer. But the important thing is, Osiris is tied up with a real possible use for this boat. According to the myth of Osiris, it's a very long and involved myth, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but let me give you the comic book version. Osiris comes to Earth to civilize Egypt. Now, by civilize Egypt, what we mean is he's going to teach Egypt farming and cattle raising. So they're no longer going to be hunter-gatherers. They're going to be sedentary people. He's very successful. He goes off to civilize the rest of the world. His wife, Isis, is left in charge. And her job is really to keep her brother-in-law intact, or brother intact, Seth, the archetype of the devil. He tries to do bad things. Isis keeps him intact. But eventually, when Osiris returns, Seth kills him, kills Osiris, hacks him into 13 pieces, scatters the pieces up and down the Nile. Isis sets out to find her dismembered husband, gets most of the pieces, right, reassembles them, and buries them at Abydos. So Abydos is where Osiris is buried. It's a sacred place. And every Egyptian wanted to make a pilgrimage to Abydos to visit the tomb of Osiris. And the idea was, if you left an offering, you'd have a better chance of resurrecting with Osiris. So on tombs throughout Egypt, we have depictions on the walls of the Abydos pilgrimage, people going in their boats to Abydos. Here's one. And what's really, really interesting is if you look at the oars. They're not seated. The men are standing up. But also a sail is up. Now, let me say something about the Egyptians as sailors and what we know about what they did. The Egyptians were rather poor sailors. They were a boat culture. Boats were a very significant part of their civilization. But they weren't really good at it. They weren't good at navigating because they were a river people. Rivers are easy, especially in Egypt. The dominant breeze comes out of the north. The current goes from south to north. So when you're going in one direction, you put your sails up when you're going south, and you go with the wind. When you're coming back, you can put your sails down, and you go with the current. No navigation. You can see the banks on either side. It's a piece of cake. They really didn't like to venture out. The Mediterranean, for example, wasn't the thing they often did. They called the Mediterranean the Wajwar, the Great Green. The Great Green. It was kind of a little scary. So they used boats, but they weren't great at it. Now, this is an interesting one because you can tell which direction they're going now because the sail's up, going south, right? And the guys are, I think they're not rowing. They're using these oars as what we would call quarter rudders. They're steering with them. They're just to direct the boat, not to gain power. So that's a guy going off to Abydos on his pilgrimage. I'll show you another one. There. This is a great one. I love it. Let me show you. So you get yeah. Now first, here's the captain, and he's taking a sounding. He's got a long pole, and he's taking a sounding, and he's giving his results to the little kid up here on the yardarm, and he's yelling it back to the guy who's steering so they can avoid a sandbar. Right? Now, if you look at the rowers, you'll see they're at rest, right? With the sails up, these guys don't have to row. They're sitting at rest. They've kind of all got the same posture, except, well, sure. This guy, he's getting a drink of water. You see that? It's kind of cool. And the captain here, taking the sounding, he's in a little receptacle, a little enclosure, so he doesn't fall overboard, right? So we have plenty of scenes of the Abydos pilgrimage on tomb walls. And there's an interesting sort of holdover or maybe descendant of this practice. In Egypt today, all Egyptians want to make a pilgrimage. If you can afford it, you're obligated to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, right? And for every Muslim who can afford it should make a pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. And in the 1960s, they did this a lot, more than now. But I'll show you. They painted their pilgrimage scenes on their houses. And that's one of the scenes, on the outside of a house in a village in Luxor. And the guy showing, we took the boat to the plain, and then we made it to Mecca, and we saw the Kaaba. So they're showing also that I made the pilgrimage. Right? So there's an interesting holdover. Now, maybe, just maybe, this Cheops boat was used for the Abydos pilgrimage. It's a possibility. But let me show you another possibility. This is a large river craft going on an expedition south on the Nile to Nubia. Now, Nubia is where the Sudan is today. And this is where the Egyptians got their gold. The gold of Egypt, the gold of mask of Tutankhamun, came from Nubia in the south. This is a tomb painting of a man named Huy's boats, H-U-Y. He was the viceroy to Nubia for Tutankhamun. And on his wall, he showed the boats he took to get to Nubia, right? So you can see the sails up in one, sails down in another. And what I want to show you here, and there's a big boat, it's a big boat. He's got his horse with him. He liked horses, and he's taking his horses with him. And they're on the deck. In ancient Egypt, they did not use the hold of the ship for cargo. Everything went on the deck. Everything. Right? So he's got his ship up, his sails are up, he's got his horse, and he's off to Nubia. So it's a possibility, just a possibility, that the Cheops boat was used for expeditions south to Nubia. Maybe. Last possibility, it's kind of neat, is that the ship was used on an expedition on the Red Sea, all the way to the land of Punt, P-U-N-T. Now, we don't know exactly where Punt is. We think it's either Eritrea or Somalia, somewhere like that. And this is a relief, a carving, that's on the temple of Queen Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, her mortuary temple. Right? She was very proud of the expedition to Punt. She sent 5 ships there, and on the walls, she shows her ships. And it's kind of neat. You can see, by the way, that everything on the deck, I mean, it's really crowded. This is the frankincense and myrrh, sacks of frankincense and myrrh. But Hatshepsut's really cool. She's also bringing back trees. And there's the tree with the basket, with the roots protected in the basket, right there. So she's going to grow her own frankincense and myrrh trees, right? And there's also, if you look carefully, there's baboons, right? She's going to bring back baboons. There's a baboon right there, right? And there's the trees in their pots. So maybe, just maybe, Cheops boat went to the Red Sea, to Punt. We'll see. We'll see. Now, the Hatshepsut boat is a really great example of why the Egyptians had to tie their boats together. Right? It was absolutely necessary. It wasn't a choice, almost. They lived along the Nile. Almost all Egyptians lived along the Nile. Now, if you're going on the Red Sea, right, let's see how you're going to do it. A second. Yeah. There's the Nile. Now, let's say you want to go to Punt. Here's the Red Sea. You're going to have to take your boat all the way through the desert to the Red Sea. You're going to have to haul it. Now, think about the Cheops boat. 144 feet, 38 tons. How are you going to haul that through the desert 100 miles? Right? Not easy. You tie it, and you take it apart. So you sail it down to where you want to go. On the Nile, you take it apart, you have several hundred men carrying the parts, and you port it through a place called the Wadi Hammamat to the Red Sea, reassemble it, and you go on your expedition. You had to take it apart. That's why they sewed boats. Now, if you wanted to go to the Sinai, over here, to get your copper and your turquoise, you would take it across from the Nile here. Right? And in the last 10 years, they have found really interesting things relevant to the Cheops boat on the Red Sea. And I think it's changed the way we view what they did. One of the things they found are boathouses carved into the cliffs right by the water. Right? Now look at it. It's about the size for a Cheops boat dismantled. So what I think they did is the following. We used to always think they hauled the boat to the Red Sea, they put it back together, they went to the land of Punt, they sailed back, they took it apart, they hauled it back to the Nile, they took their, right? No. I think it was a one-way journey. They took it apart, carried it to the Red Sea, put it back together, sailed to where they're going, sailed back, and then they left it on the Red Sea at the port in these boathouses so they wouldn't have to carry it back all the way to the Nile. So it was only a one-way trip. So it's kind of interesting. And in here, they have found pieces of boats, right? That's Cedar of Lebanon, and even papyri, some of the oldest papyri we have, right? And in the upper left-hand corner, I think you can see there's a cartouche of Khufu, right? So it's just the time of Khufu. Now, this is all sort of speculation about how the boat could have been used. Maybe Abydos pilgrimage, maybe it's a celestial boat, mythological, maybe it went to the Red Sea, maybe it was used for an expedition down to Nubia. Speculation, no hard data at all. This changed just by sheer luck in 1994. 1994, I was director of the National Endowment for the Humanities program called Egyptology Today. The idea was we were going to bring high school teachers and junior high school teachers to my campus and teach them Egyptology, make them junior Egyptologists. And the idea was it would invigorate their teaching. So we had art teachers, history teachers, science teachers, and they would go back to their schools after the summer, being able to translate hieroglyphs, knowing about history, and they would then incorporate it into their lesson plans and have something new to do. That was the idea, and it worked pretty well. One student, Howie Nepo, said to me, "Can I do my term paper on Hatshepsut's boats?" I said, "Sure, that'd be great, Howie. That's a good idea." And Howie handed in his paper, a really good paper, but with it, he handed in a model he had carved of the boat. And it was a half model. It's about, maybe 2 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet. And it's the kind you hang on the wall, so it's only a slice of the boat. It's a hemi-section of the boat, and it goes on a wall, and the thing was beautiful. I mean, it was really gorgeous. And I was wondering, I don't know much about boats at this point. Is it as good as I think it is? Is this model really that incredible? So at the time, I was also teaching at a rather interesting school, which none of you have probably ever heard of. It's an unusual school in that it has probably some of the highest SATs in the country. The students all graduate with very high-paying salaries. I think it's one of the most difficult schools in the country to get into, and nobody knows it. Anybody know the school? I'll give you a clue. Won't help you. It may look vaguely familiar because it was used as Wayne Manor in the Batman movies. It's the Webb Institute for Naval Architecture, right? It's a school where the students all want to be naval architects or something in the industry. So the kids go for 4 years, but they graduate with 2 degrees, marine engineering and naval architecture, right? So this is the place where I took my model that Howie Nepo had carved, and I wanted to show it to the professors. And I said to the guys, "Is this as good as I think it is?" And the guys looked at it, they just said, "This is wonderful." They said, "It's really fabulous." And one of the professors said to me, "Could your student carve a full model of the boat? Because then we could test it in the tank and see what it does. We could test this little model and see what this Hatshepsut's boat could have done." So I went back to Howie Nepo, and I said to him, "Howie, can you carve a full model of the Hatshepsut boat?" And he looked at me like I was an idiot, and he said, "What do you mean? I carved the right side with my right hand, the left side with my left hand." I didn't know it. He was a world-class model carver, as was his father. But then he looks at me like I'm an idiot, and he says to me, "But it won't work, because the Hatshepsut boat is just a relief on a wall. It doesn't really tell us the depth. It doesn't give us the lines. It's not enough information to carve an accurate model of what this ship looked like." So we had another possibility. In Egyptian tombs, noblemen often put little models of boats. And these are 3-dimensional. So I took Howie to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see some of the boats, and he again looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, "Wait a second, this is folk art. It's not a model of a boat." And it's not accurate. And he pointed out to me, "Look, they're all flat on the bottom, so they can stand in the tomb." So that wouldn't work either. Then came the idea. What about the Cheops boat? We have that boat. Could Howie carve a model of that boat? And he said, "Sure, that we can do." Not only that, there's a wonderful book called Ships of the Pharaohs by Landstrom, and he had the lines of the ships drawn out already. So Howie, by looking at the boat, going from Landstrom, could do a model of the boat, and we were going to test it in the tank, and for the first time, we're going to figure out what this thing really could do. So how he began carving with his father Morris. This is their workshop. And he carved a 7-foot model of the boat, 1 in 20. And it was a thing of beauty. Now, this is not the boat. I want to show you what the tank looks like at Webb. This is a model of a boat. All the kids for their senior project, they usually design a boat, build a little model, and then they test it in the tank to see how good it is. And there's an armature at the top, as you can see. This thing, it pulls the boat through the tank and automatically records all the measurements you need on this boat, drag and things like that. Let me show you one more of this boat in the tank. And you can see this one, it's tilted a bit. We do it with heel. We want to see when will the boat swamp. We can do it with waves. So it's a really great testing facility. And there we are measuring the boat. That's the 7-foot model. And I think you can see how he's even made a rigging so we can put the oars in the water and see how the drag is with the oars in and things like that. So we're measuring it. And that's Larry Ward. Professor Ward is the one who runs the tank. And now we're getting it in the tank and getting ready to test it. Right? So for the first time, we had some empirical data on this boat. Right? Now, what did we learn? Right? Well, we learned a lot. Now, there was one unfortunate thing about this project. This is why it's ongoing, still going. This is 1994. Stu Green, the student on the left, did his thesis, wrote up his results, and that was the end of it. Never published. It's often the case that students are rushed at the end. It's the end of the term. They're graduating, and they just leave things behind. It was never published, nothing ever done with it. Science magazine did a news story about it, but not the data, and it kind of languished. We just didn't know what to do with it. So anyway, what did we learn? Well, first of all, Charney's idea that it's a mythological boat not really used, that was dead wrong. This thing is a big boat that's meant to be on the water. The lines were perfect for a Nile craft. So this thing was used. There's no doubt about it. It wasn't some symbolic thing. So that's out. That's out. It's not symbolic. What about the Abydos pilgrimage? One of the problems, you remember it didn't have a mast or a sail? Well, how's it going to get to Abydos if you can't go with the wind, right? Going against the current. That's a problem. But there's a solution to it. Sometimes in the tomb paintings, you see 2 boats going to Abydos, and they're tied together. One has a sail up, the other's being towed. So it's still in the running, this possibility in Abydos. Let me show you another one, though, another slide. It's a badly damaged tomb, but it's worth looking at carefully. You can see the oars, what we now call quarter rudders. They're in the water, and they're helping to steer. The sails are down, right? So it's possible. But I think there's another reason why I don't think it's an Abydos boat, though. This is our Cheops boat. Look at the cabin. Right? It's got a door, but aside from the door, it's entirely enclosed. No windows. I don't see a pharaoh going in an enclosed cabin to Abydos. I just don't think it would work. Show you another one of it. There. That's with the door open. So I think it's out as an Abydos boat too, I think. All right? Now, that's a little baldachin, it's called. That's where the captain stands out of the sun. Right? So, how was this thing used? This is Hatshepsut's, right? It couldn't have been used on the Red Sea. I'll tell you why. One of the things we learned on the tests is when that boat, the Cheops boat, was at 11 degrees heel, and that's not much of a heel, that's a slight angle, it swamped. We did a computer simulation. At 9 degrees it swamped. So the thing did not go on open water. Waves would just swamp it in a minute. So forget the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, any of that. It was a river craft. But how was it used? Well, I'll give you a clue we had. There is a papyrus called the Great Harris Papyrus. It's called the Great, well, first it's called Harris because Harris owned it. Papyri are named after the people who own them. It's called the Great Harris Papyrus because it's the longest papyrus yet discovered. It's 120 feet long. Right? And it deals with the reign of the pharaoh Ramses III. Details, everything. And at the end, it talks about one of the things that Ramses III was proud of. He buried his father, right, Setnakht, properly. And what he says is, he was rowed in his king's barge on the river and rested in his eternal house west of Thebes. So the real possibility is this was a funeral hearse, right? It was a barge that the pharaoh's body was taken from the east bank of the Nile, where they lived, to the west bank, where they buried their dead. So that's the bet for this boat. Now, we have scenes on tomb walls of hearse boats, boats that were used to bring the dead across. Now, these young ladies here are not members of the family. They are mourners, but they are paid mourners. They're professionals who are paid to weep and wail at funerals, right? And they are on a boat, right? That's being towed. So this may be the kind of thing that this Cheops boat was used to go from the east bank to the west bank. I'll show you another one. There's another one. They have the two boats, both boats, mourners here, right? I'll show you a really romantic 19th century depiction of this sort of thing. There. That's a Bridgman painting. It's a beautiful thing. And you got your boat with the sail up and the barge being towed, right? So the Cheops boat would be the equivalent of the second boat. And that makes some sense. Let me go one more, another drawing of it. So now that we have data, reasonable data on this boat, I think it is reasonable to say we finally know what this boat could do, what it couldn't do. Not going on the Red Sea, it's not going on the Mediterranean. It's a funeral boat. And I think that makes sense of the enclosed cabin, right? So for the first time, we have a pretty good idea of what the thing really probably was used for, but the project doesn't end there. That's why it's called a project. It's still working on it. The fantasy right now, at this point, is that we can still learn more. There's a lot more to learn about this boat. And we could learn it if we built a full-scale model. If we built a 144-foot boat and put it on the Nile and see what it could do. Now, my hope, I mean, at Webb, we have the people who can do this. The alum of Webb, Webb's been around for more than 125 years, so we have students who have graduated now, own shipyards, they're makers and shakers in the industry. We have the expertise and probably the funds even maybe to do this project. It's just a question of, are we going to do it and how do we do it? I'll tell you a funny story. You know, it's a hard project. I'll show you why. Let me show you why. What we're trying to do now first is put out our data, show everybody what we've learned by the test. We rewrote it. And what happened, it's a wonderful thing. About a year ago, I got a letter, an email, from a graduate of Webb, Mike Morabito, who graduated something like probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And he's now a professor of naval history at Annapolis, at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And he wrote to me and said, Dr. Brier, is there any project you're working on that I could be part of? So I thought of Stu Green's dissertation, which was languishing. And I said, Mike, if we could write up this thing, we could get it out, we might really learn about the boat and figure it out, and then build it. So Mike helped, and he did the computer simulations, he got it together, and now we're publishing these things so people can, see what this is in the Journal of Ship Production and Design. So we want all the shipping people to see this, that this thing's available. Does it make sense what we're saying? So we're getting the data out. And if we build it, we do have some things to go by. For example, very often in tombs, the Egyptians put pictures of ships being built, right? And here you've got guys building a ship. I'll show you another one. Now, the real desire is, if you're really going to learn, I mean, as Peter said in the introduction, I guess it was 1994, I mummified a human cadaver in the Egyptian way. And the reason I did it was to figure out how the Egyptians did it. So I used ancient tools. I used obsidian flakes to make my incisions. I used copper tools for various things. I dug my natron, the dehydrating salts, from the valleys where the ancient Egyptians went. And I learned a lot. For the first time, we really figured out how they did a lot of this, How do you take a brain out through the nose? It's not easy. So I'm very I'm very sort of positive about experimental archaeology. I think you really learn most by doing. So the hope is we'll actually build this boat. Now, there are craftspeople who are around, who are also Egyptologists, who can do the ancient techniques. For example, Geoffrey Killen. He's an Egyptologist whose specialty is carpentry in ancient Egypt. And what you see him working on now is a bow drill. That's how the Egyptians drilled holes. This is the shaft, the bit is here, and this is very much like a bow from a bow and arrow. And in his hand here, he's holding sort of a hemisphere, and the bow, when he rubs it back and forth, turns the shaft and drills the hole. And it turns around inside the little hemisphere. So he's been doing these things for years, and he knows how to craft things work. The problem is, when I talked to him about the boat project, he was all gung-ho, this would be great. He said, but let me tell you about the man-hours that it takes. He said, to drill one hole, like you have hundreds of in the Cheops Boat, it takes about 5 hours. Right? But my response is that's why God made graduate students. But we do have craftspeople, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Another problem, just to be realistic, another problem is getting the cedar of Lebanon. There are no trees big enough in Lebanon now to build a Cheops boat. As I said before, the largest plank in it is 74 feet long. That means you need a 100-foot tree. Not easy to get the cedar, and we've really got to do it out of cedar. There is a hope. I mean, there are ways of overcoming these things. In England, cedars of Lebanon were transplanted in 1838. And some of them are owned by commercial paper mills. So there's a chance we can get cedars of Lebanon even. So it won't be easy, but the hope is that one day, in the not too distant future, we will see the Cheops boat sailing on the Nile once again. Thank you.